speaking on the issues that impact. This is the Patrick Henningsen Show on TNT Radio.
Welcome back, folks. Welcome back to TNT Today's News Talk. We're still in the first hour of this live broadcast. Some excellent points and some controversial comments, as always, by Syrian Girl there in the previous segment. She is an amazing commentator and definitely one who is on the cutting edge of a lot of these conversations. She's been pretty much banging the drum on all of this, really from the beginning, and then some. So yeah, great to have her on the program. I want to welcome on to the program right now our intrepid correspondent this week, Basil Valentine, is joining us on the live link right now. We want to get Basil's reaction to this historic ruling, what it means, and how things are going to unfold going forward. Let's bring him onto the stage. Basil Valentine, great to have you with us.
Good afternoon, Patrick. Good to be with you, and hello to our listeners all around the world.
Basil, what do you make of this ruling so far? I mean, it seems like pretty much a blowout in terms of the split on the votes. We already commented earlier how Israel, even the Israeli judge, voted against Israel on a number of these points. The only one they had in the tank was Uganda, Tel Aviv. They could only count on Uganda for total unflagging support. Otherwise, it was a rout. But what are your thoughts? What are your criticisms? Do you have anything to give us?
Yeah, I'd call today a step in the right direction. I don't think it's any more than that, but it is a step in the right direction and a significant step. The Israelis are trying to spin it that they can carry on with the killing, that they have already been doing everything they can to avoid genocide. This has been their claim all along. They claim they're not targeting civilians, even though, 26,000 have been killed, including 300 in the last 24 hours. So as far as they're concerned, it's carry on regardless. That's the dangerous thing. Now, it remains to be seen. We've had no statement, for example, yet from the British Labour Party. I haven't seen one from the Prime Minister either. So, whether or not the Western powers abide by this ruling, recognize the error of their ways, and immediately stop arming Israel remains to be seen. Coincidentally, of course, Joe Biden has announced just today that he is suspending funding for the United Nations Palestine Relief Agency, the UNRWA, after claims that allegations, I should say, that some of its members were involved in October the 7th. I know.
Unbelievable.
But generally, of course, the social media sphere is marking this down as a huge defeat for Israel. That's the overwhelming understanding. Mick Wallace, the outspoken Irish MEP, today's ruling is a huge defeat for Israel. ICJ rules that Israel is credibly accused of potentially genocidal acts against Palestinians. Israel must now act to ensure that Palestinians are no longer at risk of harm plus genocidal acts. Nations facilitating Israel's war must stop. Now, as I said, Israel will claim that Palestinians are not at risk of harm or genocidal acts, that the bombardment, the aerial bombardment, is designed to eliminate Hamas. It's war and there's collateral damage, which is what they call Palestinian civilians. So it remains to be seen whether or not this has any meaningful effect. Philip Proudfoot has tweeted, still no response from Labour on the ICJ ruling. This is hours afterwards. Either they didn't think it was coming or they just don't care. Either way, it's another disgrace in a long list of disgraces. Of course, last night and this morning, social media was full of pictures from a Labour Party meeting in Cheadle in Lancashire, where anti-genocide protesters disrupted Angela Rayner's fundraising event and were rather crudely ejected by the local constabulary. But as Tiberius, another important influencer on X has posted, I'm tentatively pleased with the ICJ ruling, but this is merely the first step in a long process towards justice that Israel and the corrupt Western order will seek to deny and derail and stifle and slither out from at every step. We know that already. It's more than symbolic, however, as this ruling means there can be no credible hiding behind the lies that Israel is operating within international law. The highest court on the matter has ruled that there is sufficient evidence to believe that they are not. And let's face it, we all know they're not. This is just a game that depraved Western leaders like to play to maintain their pretenses of caring about justice when we know that they don't. I couldn't have put it any better myself.
Great comment there on that X Twitter account, Tiberius. Definitely share that with me on the back line. I'll make sure I retweet that out. Very poignant, very, very much on the money there. Basil, what do you think about the political ramifications for those officials, especially Israeli allied countries and governments, that have been basically running cover for this? And really kind of, you could put them in the category, is this too extreme, Basil? Genocide deniers? And what's the political ramifications?
I don't think genocide deniers is too strong at all. Genocide enablers and abettors. Craig Murray, the former British ambassador, now effectively a journalist and activist, posted a couple of hours ago, Biden, von der Leyen, Sunak, Blinken, Cameron, all now in clear danger of criminal charges for complicity in genocide. And the ultimate crime, really, genocide, we jolly well hope that they are now indicted. So what we're likely to see this year going forward is essentially a power struggle for the key levers and principles on which this world is founded, Patrick, because the likes of Biden, von der Leyen, Sunak, Blinken, and Cameron no doubt consider themselves above the law, certainly above any international institution's reach. It remains to be seen whether or not charges are brought against any of these people. There's also another case in California, which the Biden administration have been trying to get dismissed. Are you aware of that one, Patrick?
No, go ahead. Give us the details.
It's the San Francisco Chronicle here reporting that the judge appears wary of this case. The Bay Area federal judge in a case accusing President Joe Biden of aiding genocide against Palestinians has asked the opposing sides questions that appears to signal he plans to dismiss the suit because the case involves political rather than legal issues. On Wednesday, 2 days before a hearing in the suit by Palestinian rights groups against Biden and two top aides, U.S. District Judge Jeffrey White of Oakland told lawyers for the plaintiffs and the government to be prepared to answer these questions. Under what authority can the court in effect exercise its judgment over and reverse U.S. foreign policy decisions, etc.? Now, this, I'm afraid, is likely to be the similar sort of get out that politicians are looking for. They will claim that courts do not have the jurisdiction, that these are political matters, they're not legal matters. Any and every trick in the book will, of course, be used by the currently powerful, whether they remain so, to slither out of any charges.
Okay, well, hopefully we're going to get Freddie Ponton joining us any moment now. We've also got him on the live link as well from France. He's going to give us his interpretation and reactions as to what has taken place here. I'm talking with Basil Valentine right now, our intrepid correspondent, getting reactions from the ICJ ruling. International Courts of Justice have issued an interim decision to basically cease and desist. And as I was reading the Genocide Convention Article 2, Basil, to not only to our listeners here, but I was on a very large Twitter Spaces this morning, basically pointing out, as nobody was, all the Israeli spokespeople were there on the panel, and I pointed out to everybody, I said, hey, this isn't an explicit ceasefire order because the ICJ can't rule a ceasefire order. But what it does is they say they have to uphold the Genocide Convention. And if you read Article 2, Basil, that means Israel, according to the Genocide Convention, must cease and desist targeting the party in question, which is the native Palestinian population. So it's like everyone's arguing semantics, Basil. They're all arguing semantics, but you can't get away from the fact that the Genocide Convention is still in play. This is ratified by all these countries' legislations. Your comment?
But that's right. Ali Aboumanar, the Palestinian campaigner, posted, Israel will respond the same way as it does to any and every ruling. Ignore it. This is about forcing the rest of the world to act. Israel has been found by the ICJ to be plausibly accused of genocide, which is huge and unprecedented. And he also posted saying a ceasefire is what you demand in an armed conflict. In a genocide, you demand an immediate end to all genocidal acts. And that is exactly what the ICJ ordered with immediate effect. Please stop helping Israel spin its historic defeat as a win.
Yeah, and the defiance coming out of the Israeli camp right now, the statements are just unbelievable. I was on Twitter Spaces on Mario Nafal's space this morning, and I sort of Israeli spokesperson of sorts, her name is Noga. She basically accused the judges of being anti-Semitic at The Hague. She deemed this to be an anti-Semitic ruling, and so forth. So that's being said by, I think, intelligence or defense ministers. Defense minister said that as well from Israel. So that's where they're at with that. Let me bring in Freddie Ponton right now, our European correspondent, to get his reaction to the ruling by the International Courts of Justice. We'll bring Freddie Ponton, investigative journalist Freddie Ponton. Thank you for joining us, Freddie.
Hey, it's a pleasure. Thank you very much, Patrick, for having me.
Freddie, what's your reaction to the ruling? What does it mean to you, and what should we look for going forward?
Well, it's something that a lot of people around the world were anticipating, of course, as far as, which way the International Court of Justice will go. So I think a lot of people around the world are delighted today to see that there are still an international rule order, if you will, that allows the international law to prevail and stepping away from the political agenda each member state may have. In this instance, I think it's very promising, especially when you look at the vote and how many judges voted in favor of this order and the provisional measures attached to it. So I think that we can take a small victory here, and we have to take a small victory wherever we can find them. And I'm sure that in Gaza, as well as in West Bank and around the various acts of resistance, especially in Yemen, I think people will be delighted that the court has saw the light. So very interesting, because the momentum now is building up. I think everybody understands this is a two-step mechanism. This was step one, about establishing the plausibility of a genocide being committed against the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip by Israel. So that has been established as a plausible fact, and including, obviously, many aspects of what was outlined in the pleas from the South Africans. So it's really about preserving life. I think that's the main message here, is to preserve life and also address the character of urgency. As Basil just said, it's very important to understand that a lot of the states, whether they party to the Genocide Convention or not, they will all now been aware of a plausible genocide or genocidal activities taking place in the Gaza Strip. So they need to also obey to that order. It's not only Israel, it's the entire spectrums of states that might, for some of them, been involved in helping, aiding and abating the state of Israel, which is now in something that has been described and seen as a plausible genocidal activities. So they must stop. They must stop aiding, they must stop abating, they must stop providing logistical support, military support, financial support, even expertise support, anything that can be seen as aiding Israel in what is described as a plausible genocide will be an action against this particular judgment. So it's a great position, because we now see, according to the International Court of Justice status, Article 41/2, that not only as I said, the states are now being made aware, but also it gives the opportunity now for South Africa to approach and to borrow the natural path for this order to be enforced, which is the United Nations Security Council. So the United Security Council will find it very difficult to kind of thwart, if you will, to try to undermine a decision of justice. Even though this is still a court order, it's still legally binding by law, they have to obey to it. Israel has to comply with what has been stated in the provisional order. But the UNSC must also look at it from a court and an international law perspective, and not from a political perspective. So for, let's say, for instance, the UK or the United States to even entertain the possibility to veto and use this veto power to stop the enforcement of a court order coming out of the highest court in the United Nations and perhaps to the world, I think it will be politically very damning, and it will also showcase the hypocrisy of states like the United States, which, as we all know, has been supporting Israel from the get-go. So I think it's really nice to see that right now South Africa has been vindicated in terms of its claims. Its plea was really well outlined on the 11th of January. And we want to see now what will Israel's reaction will be. Of course, I'm sure many in your audience, Patrick, will be very kind of cautious about being too excited about Israel complying to these provisional orders. But I think that within the month's time, the court has clearly indicated that Israel needed to provide the court with a report outlining all the effort made towards avoiding basically being in contravention with the provisional measures. So we're going to see what is going to happen. But I think it's really important also to look at Article 49 of the UN Charter, Patrick. Article 49 of the UN Charter, Patrick, is very, very clear about the possibility of enforcing these provisional measures. And if Israel was to not enforce them, was not to comply with them, the Security Council has the task and the responsibility to make recommendation to make sure that they're going to enforce it. And they obviously have different tools and instruments that can be used to do that. And meaning sanctions, economic sanctions, but also the deployment of troops on the ground at the last resort. So it's, as I say, it's an ongoing story, it's ongoing development, and we're going to follow that very, very closely to make sure we understand exactly where this is going and how Israel is going to react.
Excellent legal analysis there, Freddie Ponton. That's brilliant. And I'm glad you brought it back to the point, Freddie, as everyone's arguing about semantics and does Israel have to comply or not. It's about stopping the killing. It's about stopping the rapacious killing we've been seeing for the last 3 months. And we have to keep the conversation real and anchor it. And I appreciate you doing that. Basil Valentine, what do you make about Freddie's comment, how this is going to get kicked up to the UN level now, UN Security Council? We know it's going to happen there, Basil. The United States is going to veto it. Then it's going to go to the General Assembly, but that's a whole different story. They can't be vetoed in the General Assembly. They can make a number of recommendations, including suspending Israel as a UN member. That would be quite huge politically as well. Basil, I want to get your quick comment. I want to go back to Freddie before we break for the hour. Basil, go ahead.
I'm given to understand that the nature of the ruling is such that it will not go to the UN Security Council.
Okay.
That's my understanding. Also, I'm afraid to say, it looks like there's trouble ahead. One of the most ardent Zionist accounts on X, Visegrad 24, you may be familiar with it, has announced an hour ago that Israel won in court today. The ICJ recognized that Israel has an inalienable right to defend itself against the terrorist onslaught Israel faces. It demands the immediate release of all hostages. South Africa's attempt to empty the word genocide of its meaning failed. So, in other words, I don't think the Israelis have any intention of modifying any aspect of their behavior whatsoever, with the possible proviso that they may allow the trickle of aid into Gaza to increase slightly. But don't hold your breath. In all other respects, I don't expect them to change their course at all. They will continue to claim that they are fighting terrorists and that everything they're doing is for that end and that end alone.
Yeah, you're correct, Basil. That account, Visegrad, that is like an official kind of Israeli propaganda outlet. So if you want to hear what's in Bibi Netanyahu's head, just follow Visegrad. Is it Visegrad 24 on Twitter?
Visegrad 24. Yeah, you need a strong stomach. I warn you. You know.
Okay, so we know we expected that's going to be the case. But the thing is, ICJ is state to state. Hamas is not a state actor. So that's a claim that I think the Israelis are making, a desperate claim, Freddie, is that this is about Hamas, but Hamas doesn't even come into it. It's about whether what Israel's doing is a genocide, constitutes genocide with genocidal intent. Therefore, other states can then hold them to account like South Africa did, and others are lining up as well, Freddie. So there's not a very strong argument from the Israelis, Freddie, but they're going to run with it still. Go ahead, Freddie.
Yes, of course, there's a serious detachment with reality when speaking of Israel communications and public relation. So you're going to have accounts on Twitter, but last time I checked, it's the international rule of law that speaks, and that really stands. What someone says on Twitter has very little value. At this particular stage, especially coming from these guys, which I know don't know them personally. But just to go back to what Basil say, I think very clearly, and I have it in front of me, but the article, as I say, 41 section 2 is very clear. Pending the final decision, notice of the measures suggested shall forthwith be given to the parties and the Security Council. So there's no, black and white. It's no gray zone. It's really straightforward. The South African in the statements, which I've shared on my Twitter account, I posted a couple of videos this morning about this court ruling, and people would be able to read the statement. And I really invite them to read the statement. It's made by lawyers clearly, and it's quite clear that they also mentioned the Article 41/2 of the status of the International Court of Justice. So that's what prevails now. It's the path, the natural path where this court order is going to be directed towards for the UN Security Council to be aware of it, for the states to be aware of it, and to be prepared, obviously, to enforce it. Now, whether Israel is going to enforce it or not, it's out of our control. And at this stage, we must focus on what we can control. I completely agree with Basil on the fact that there's very little chance that Israel would change its course of action in the Gaza Strip. If they wanted a ceasefire, they had many opportunities to do that. And if the United States wanted a ceasefire, they could have done that a long time ago, and many lives could have been saved. So what these guys are going to do is really up to everybody kind of assumptions. But at the end of the day, we need to stick to what the international rule of law is saying and follow the guidelines and what the court order is describing and as indicated in this provisional order. That's what we need to stick to. And whatever comes out of Israel, of the US, it's going to be what has been coming out of these both states for the past 3 months. Nothing is going to change much, but there is legal liability for aiding and abetting a state that has been described as plausibly involved and undertaking a genocidal activities in the Gaza Strip against the Palestinians. That's what we need to remember from this court order and from this ruling. The rest is propaganda, public relations, communication. But at the end of the day, the states will have to obey to that.
That's correct. And I might point out, even Israel's statement of Israel has the right to defend itself, they're trying to flip the actual international law. Actual international law is very clear, is that if you're occupied, i.e. the Palestinians, only they have the right to defend themselves. Israel only has the right to defend themselves under the UN Charter from an attack by another country, another state actor. So actually international law is very squarely on the side of the Palestinians, and also international courts of justice and the UN uphold the right for armed liberation struggle. armed liberation struggle for any group by any means necessary. So go ahead. We only got 30 seconds. Go ahead, Freddie.
What I would add to that is even if we were to argue, which is arguable, of course, the fact that Israel has the right to defend itself, I think, yes, we all understand that Israel has the right to secure itself and to basically bring back order. That's what they're entitled to do, as you clearly and rightly so said, that obviously the Palestinians and the people in Gaza and the Hamas are not a state. But the right to defend yourself, even if we were to consider that, still has to be done in accordance with international law.
Well, they claim that they are.
Go ahead, Basil. Go ahead. 10 seconds, Basil. We're going to break in a second.
The ruling has completely shifted the Overton window of the conversation in Europe and the United States. The claim that people out on the streets protesting against genocide are somehow hate marchers, or that, the official government positions of Western nations are acceptable. That's all gone out the window. What actually happens on the ground in Gaza, what Israel does, that's another matter. Whether we get as far as David Cameron, Rishi Sunak and Joe Biden being indicted for war crimes, that's another matter. But the conversation has shifted irredeemably.
For now, let's just take a break with TNT, Today's News Talk. I'm Patrick Henningsen, your host. We'll be right back.